Hello, fellow fans of Christopher Manson's Maze. Bill M. here with another Maze commentary, and this commentary is going to be addressing something that many of you, I'm sure, would say is already obvious, and you don't need to be told about it. But unfortunately, I run into people now and then for whom it is not obvious, and so that's why I'm going to address it, and it has something to do with exits. I'm going to be throwing in also an interesting trivia bit about exits in Maze and unnumbered doors that you may not have noticed. But let's continue. Now, I know some of you have the attitude of too long, didn't watch, and you want a summary of what this clip is about. Well, I think the best way to sum it up is with an example. Here is a picture from the book of Room 44. We see that there are two and only two choices on where we can go from here. We can take the door marked 21, which will take us to room 21, or we can take the door marked 18, which will take us to room 18. There are two other doors in the picture, but they are not numbered, so they are not exits. They are just two unnumbered doors. Unnumbered doors are not exits from the room you see them in. They are just unnumbered doors. So that's it. That's ultimately all I really wanted to point out with this video. I know some of you out there may now, understandably, be wondering, Bill, come on. I watch your videos to hear your takes on, clues and how you analyze things in Maze. What you just told me here that's just basic information on how the book Maze works. I mean, everybody knows that, right? You have different rooms with different numbers, and you navigate the maze by picking a door with a number and going to that room number. I mean, come on, Bill, doesn't everybody know this? And the answer to that question is sadly no, and I'll explain what I mean in the slides that follow. Of course, before we go any further, I have to say, please give this clip a like and possibly subscribe to the channel if you haven't, because that really helps me. And now let's move on. As I've mentioned in some of my past clips, my first encounter with Maze was in a bookstore back around 1992. That was the first copy of Maze that I bought and owned. And over the years, I've introduced other friends and acquaintances to the book. Also, over the years, I've run into people familiar with the book, strangers online and offline, and, exchanged thoughts on the book. As I also said in an early clip, one of the simultaneous best and most frustrating things about Maze, in my opinion, is the ambiguity of the clues. On the one hand, it offers endless possibilities for your mind to wander and make all sorts of connections and interpretations and objects and the dialogue and all that. But on the other hand, it's difficult to distinguish an authentic clue from some wild justification that your mind just imagined and isn't really there. However, this does not mean that it's impossible to tell one from the other. It does not mean that there are no objective parameters to Maze. It does not mean that solving the shortest path or solving how to best exit other rooms all comes down to blind guessing. Now, if you've been watching my other commentaries on Maze, then you've seen me try to point this out. But getting back to this notion of people who are going through Maze and try to take room movement beyond the simple navigation through numbered exits and think you can somehow travel between rooms in some other ways, namely through doors in the illustration that don't have numbers on them. Well, yes, I have met people who think this. And it seems to me that they come in one of two categories. One, the people who simply aren't too familiar with the book, and two, the people who are just pretentious twits, really. They think they're clever, but they're cheating, is the bottom line, and they're too disconnected from the world, apparently, to understand why. I will get more into what I mean with some examples. But let's just quickly go over some facts about exits before we continue. So one way to think of the exits in Maze is to say that every exit way is either a two-way exit or a one-way exit. If we exit a room to go to a second room and we find an exit there that can take us back to the previous room, then that exit is a two-way exit. But if we get to the second room and we don't find a direct exit back from where we came from, then it was a one-way exit that we took. So, for example, let's go to room 1. There are 4 exits. The exit to room 20 is a two-way exit, because if we look at room 20, we do see a numbered door there back to room 1. On the other hand, the exit from room 1 to room 21 is a one-way exit because room 21 does not have an exit back to room 1. But here is the interesting part, and it's something I myself never even thought about or noticed until I saw somebody else point it out to me. And that is this. Every unnumbered door or unnumbered passageway you see in Maze is the end of a one-way passage to that room from one of the other rooms. So notice how in room 21 we see that there are 5 archways, and 2 of them are not numbered. Well, it turns out that there are exactly 2 rooms in Maze that have one-way exits to room 21. Rooms number 1 and 12. So presumably these 2 unnumbered arches you see here are at the end of the one-way exits from room 1 and room 12. I don't know which is which, of course, but that's what they are. And again, all of the rooms in Maze are consistently drawn like this. If you look at the second picture here, the exits in room 20, notice that there are 3 exits and there is one and only one door with its number covered up. Well, it turns out that there is one and only one room in Maze that has an exit to room 20 with no exit back to it, and that is room 37. So presumably that door whose sign is covered up, if we were to take that cover down, we would see 37. One way, but it's a one-way exit from 37. And again, this is the case for all 45 rooms in Maze. Yes, I actually checked all of them to confirm. The total number of unnumbered doorways in a room matches the number of one-way exits to that room. As I said earlier, I have run into people over the years who tried rationalizing reasons to go through the unnumbered doors in Maze, or at least contemplated it as a possibility. So I put these people in one of 2 categories. The first type, I said, are people who just simply aren't familiar enough with the book Maze. So let me tell you about 2 recent examples to show you what I mean. I had somebody recently comment on one of my earlier videos. He saw that I was holding the book open to room 10, and I was describing it a bit, and he said, hey, I see that there are exits to 41 and 14 on one side, and on the left side you have 34 and this blank sign. So maybe the door that's under the blank sign is actually a door to room 43 because, you reverse the digits. And I explained to this person, no, that's not a door to 43, and I explained a little more about how the book works. I also said that it's actually the other end of an exit coming from room 37, consistency of exits and two-way exits, one-way exits, and so on. And here's another recent example. I saw somebody else on YouTube do a commentary on Maze. He was recording his reactions, attempting the book for the very first time. And at some point, he wound up in room 33, and he saw the door that had a drum over it instead of an exit number. And he thought, well, there's no exit number on that door, but there is the same sort of drum picture on the door to exit 20 over in room number 1. So maybe this other drum door goes to room 20 as well. He didn't follow through on that. It was just, a thought he had along the way, and he shared it. Now, I'm not calling either of these 2 people stupid. They were both incorrect in their speculations, but they weren't being stupid. In the first case with room 10, this person was just seeing a glimpse at a puzzle book he had never seen before, and as long as the comments section was there, he figured he'd ask, hey, is that maybe 43 because of the symmetry? Is the room a blank puzzle itself that you got to solve? And even though the answer was no, it was still just a question, and I would say it was a sensible question. It was something, you might propose as a solution if you didn't know anything about the book and you were just looking at a page with limited information to go on. And likewise, in the second example, I think anybody who has tried their hand at Maze has reached some point where you're stuck, and so your mind starts thinking of all sorts of ideas just to make some kind of connection to something. And as your mind starts reeling around with speculations, you think, hey, maybe there's something to these doors without numbers that I have to solve. I mean, if you've seen some of my past commentaries, you know that I've had all sorts of crazy ideas when it comes to certain rooms. And it was fun to let my mind wander and calculate these sorts of things. But then, of course, I had to eventually take a step back and realize, okay, well, no, this idea that I had at first doesn't really work because there's too much of a leap in logic from this part to that part. Or I would say, yeah, this thing technically works, but it's too complicated to be something the author would expect people would extrapolate from that one object in the room. So, nah, it's more like I'm kind of imagining things. I'm constructing these false explanations in my head instead of finding genuine clues, and so on and so on. So my point here is that the simple answer is still no, doors with numbers are not exits. But I can understand why somebody might at least speculate otherwise as they're trying to solve this incredibly difficult book, Maze. Particularly if they're still trying to feel things out. But that's the first type of person. As I said, there's a second type of person who thinks unnumbered exits are open game. The second type of person is the one who thinks that he or she can treat all exits in Maze as two-way exits. And to try to justify this, they use the doorway consistency that I described a moment ago. So, for example, they'll look at room 36 and say, well, there's an exit in room 45 to room 36, and that means one of these unnumbered archways in room 36 is the exit from room 45, which means that whenever we're in room 36, we can just take the same passage back to room 45. So you can go directly from room 36 to room 45. I'm so smart. No, you're not smart. You are a sophomoric twit. You might think you're being clever, but you're not. You are no more clever than the person who sees a crossword puzzle on the back of a cereal box, notices that the answers are printed on the bottom of the side of the box, and just copies the answers over and says, hey, I solved it. No, you didn't solve it. You cheated. You are not crafty. You're disingenuous. For that matter, you may have noticed some doors in Maze that have pictures over them instead of numbers. These are not numbered exits. Now, this doesn't mean that the pictures are meaningless. Maybe they are clues to solving something else in the room. But no, they are not encrypted exit numbers that you have to decode. If there are no numerals over the door, then the door is the end of some one-way exit, which means you have to pick some other way out of the room. I even saw one person comment on room 35, and this part on the right, where there's a ladder with no exit number, and say, oh, there are 6 rungs in the ladder in the doorway, so that means you can use it to go to room 6. No, that's not how this works. Now, strictly speaking, I will admit there are 2 exceptions to this rule of the only valid exits being numbered exits. And I have to mention these because if I don't, I know somebody will mention it to me otherwise in the comments. So the first exception is in the book's prologue. There is a picture of the front gate and the exit is labeled the next page, not 1. And you turn the next page to get to room 1 where you actually begin the journey. The other exception is that in room 3, there is one exit that has the number written in letters instead of numerals. They're written backwards because everything in the whole room is backwards. But yeah, NINE is still a number. It's still a numbered exit. It's still an exit to room 9. Let's move on. When I've confronted these people who treat all exits as two-way exits, do they ever say, oh, I guess I was wrong. Yes, it wouldn't be much of a maze if we treated all exits as two-way exits. Do they see the error of their ways? No, No, they never do. They just double down. Always. They'll say, well, this exit leads to here, and we have a blank door here, so it just logically follows. We can take the same door back. Besides, Bill, how do you know you're only supposed to pick numbered exits to go through? And to that I say, well, let's read the book's directions. The directions start with, this is not really a book. This is a building in the shape of a book, a maze. Each numbered page depicts a room in the maze. The doors in each room lead to other rooms. For example, the room on page 1 has doors leading to rooms 20, 26, 41, and 21. To go through door number 20, simply turn to page 20. Yeah, and also the back of the book reinforces this whole idea of how the book works. You look for clues and then choose one of the exits. If there's no exit number, then you don't know where the room goes, so it's not an exit. But of course, this isn't good enough for these people. They'll say, no, Bill, notice the directions just say the doors in each room lead to other rooms. It still doesn't say the doors in each room have to be numbered to go through them. Okay, fine. Let's play along with this stupid little idea. What does the next part of the direction say? It says, your challenge is to find your way from room 1 after the prologue to room 45 and then back to room 1 using the shortest possible path. If you use your head, you should be able to make the journey in only 16 steps. So we know that the shortest path is 16 steps, not only because the directions explicitly say so, but because there was originally an official contest for Maze where they were going to award $10,000 to anybody who solved the shortest path and the riddle and the answer to the riddle. And after the contest, the publisher publicly revealed the answer for the shortest path, along with the riddle, and the answer to the shortest path was 16 steps. If you treat all one-way exits as two-way exits, then it's possible to travel from room 1 to 45 and back using fewer than 16 steps. Therefore, I say the notion of trying to go through unnumbered doors does not hold. As the directions say, if you use your head, then you can make the journey in 16 steps. If you're claiming to be able to do it in 6 or 7 steps, then you're clearly not using your head. Maybe because your head is, I can make some guesses as to which orifice of your body your head may be up and in, but I digress. Let us move on. And I will go you one further. In the 1994 CD-ROM game version of the book, The Riddle of the Maze, all 45 rooms are there, and you can play the game in the same way you play the book. You click on the picture of a numbered exit, and you're taken to that room. Now, the spoken directions in the game are almost word for word with the directions in the book, but they do add the following line. Doors without numbers are locked. Well, there you have it. If you play the CD-ROM game and you come to those stone arches without numbers in room 36 and you click on them, you're not transported to anywhere. You remain in the same room because you didn't click an exit with an exit number. So if we're supposed to believe that going through unnumbered exits is valid, then why doesn't it work in the game? Why wouldn't they make the game work like that? The answer, of course, is because it's not a valid move. Once again, you cannot go through unnumbered doors in Maze. Period. If you still think otherwise, then at this point I just have to ask, were you one of those kids who played with G.I. Joe figures or some other kind of action figure, and when your friend shot your soldier with his soldier and said, okay, I got him, he's dead, did you say, no, I have an invisible shield. I've got protective shield and that reflects bullets off magically? Or even worse, did you try to further justify that with, well, we're all playing make-believe anyway, so I should be able to make-believe an invisible shield. Besides, you never said we couldn't have invisible shields. If you can't see what's wrong with that, or can't see why your friends would call you a cheater and not want to play with you at that point, then I don't know what to tell you. And I'm just going to leave my rant at that. For those of you who didn't need to be told any of this because you already understood the rules, well, I thank you. And I thank you especially for listening anyway. I will be doing more commentaries in the future on rooms we haven't talked about yet, talking about clues and all that stuff. Until then, take care.